back to High-Level Policy Dialogue for ASEAN Chairmanship 2023. Welcome to the panel session 2. In this session, we will discuss the topic of digital transformation, highlighting on services, finance, and payment. And to lead the discussion, we would like to invite on the stage, please welcome Senior Economist from ERIA, Dr. Fauziah.
Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before I start, I'd like to convey the message from the organizers. There is access to HRPD material today, so it will be available digitally. Simply scan the QR code displayed on your ID card and on the screen. This will grant you access to presentation slides, key link, evaluation form, and additional resource that you'll need throughout the event. So that's I did it. Right? Okay. Before I start, I'd like to remind us that today we are enjoying the results of digital transformations. Not so long time ago, if we need to do financial transactions, we need to go to the banks, to ATM, and do the financial transactions. And then later on, we use our computer, laptop, to do the internet bankings. But now, by a single applications in our smartphone, we can do almost every financial transactions, even including the stock trading, opening bank accounts, etc. So it's the results, and I'm sure that it's still progressing. And we use applications in our smartphone to pay the things that we bought. Even in Indonesia, we use Kris, thanks to Bank Indonesia, to pay food that we buy from the street vendors. And during the pandemic, we are becoming familiar with the online services like online courses, online class, online meeting, online health consultations, etc. Now, we have been through a very rapid digital transformations, and perhaps we ask ourselves, what's next? Today, we have our speakers now, very prominent and distinguished speakers, regulators, entrepreneurs, innovators. We would like to listen from them. What happened at the macro level? What happened in the policy making, and our expectations in the futures. Allow me to invite our prominent speakers. First, Pak Reza, Yamora, Siregar. Please, Pak, coming to the stage. And also Mr. Brian Wong from Alibaba. Thank you. And Ibu Fitria from Bank Indonesia. Before we listen to their presentations and knowledge, I'd like to briefly read their short bio. First, Reza Yamora Siregar. He received his Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Mathematics from Boston University, and also Doctor of Philosophy in Economics from Brown University. Pak Reza has very rich experience, both in private sectors as well as in academics and international organizations, including Cito Subas University, my alma mater, thank you, and Goldman Sachs, IMF, Ambro, and US, Adelaide University. Very long, Pak, your experience. And currently, he serves as special advisor to the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs, and the Senior Executive Vice President for Indonesian Financial Group, also Independent Commissioner for PT ERIA Asuransi Indonesia Utama. Thank you for coming here, Pak Reza. And next, we have Mr. Brian Wong, founder and chairman of Radi Media and managing director of Seacliff Partners Limited. Brian is a Chinese-American entrepreneur, investor, and author. He has very significant contributions in Alibaba. Including founded Alibaba Global Initiatives and becoming founder and executive director of the Alibaba Global Leadership Academy. He has also quite extensive range of contributions, including to the not only in private sectors but also in the international agenda, like World Economic Forum in Davos, B20 Summit, and UNCTAD's E-commerce Week. And he earned his bachelor degree from Swarthmore College and a master's certificate from the Johns Hopkins University and MBA from UPenn Wharton School. Thank you, Pak Brian. And this is my gap of using technology. Sorry. We have Ibu Fitria. Thank you, Bu, for coming. She's a director in Bank Indonesia, especially as a group head of retail payment systems. She earns his degree in economics from Bogor IPB, Bogor Agriculture University Institute, and also master degree in economics from New York University. She joined Bank Indonesia in 1998. It was after in the time of the ASEAN financial crisis. And he gains and contribute a lot in the area of monetary and reserve management, as well as in market surveillance. She became executive analyst for Bank Indonesia London representative office in 2016, and since 2020 she joined Payment Systems. Now she serves as a director. Thank you, Ibu Fitria. Now we start our discussion by inviting Pak Reza to share his thoughts.
Thank you very much. Please allow me to stand because I'm about to fall asleep after the heavy meal. Okay, let me start by saying that I'm not expert on digital. I'm just a macroeconomist. So when I'm asked to speak on this and in front of two colleagues who are obviously have a knowledge about digital and a lot more advantage than me on this issue, so I thought let me just bring this from the angle of how I see this on the role of digital transformations on macroeconomy. So let me just start with the following message. It is a fact right now that digital transformations is a prerequisite for the achievement of a number of long-term and structural reforms target that we have in Indonesia and also in ASEAN. So I'm trying to use a lot of Indonesian case, but there's a lot of lessons from Indonesian case also applicable for ASEAN. Okay? There are two issues that I think is going to be pinnacle for us. For the next 20 years, it's going to be critical. I'll come back to that in the next slide. But two issues that I thought is going to be critical in terms of digital transformations. One is actually we need digital transformations to do financial inclusions. We need digital transformations to ensure that inclusion and deepening of our financial market is taking place as required. And also at the same time, as we expand our financial market to deepening and inclusion, we need to ensure also the stability of our financial market. Here again also, digital transformation is critical. Okay, so let me come back to these issues, but in general, these are my proposal for this presentations. So let me come back to the big picture. Okay, I think if you are macroeconomists and you happen to help the government at this point, 2045 is always the message that we hope to achieve. Yeah? So we need to have what are the target, right, of whatever we do here on the macroeconomy. 2045 is our target. We want to become developed economy. What is the definition of developed economy? Per capita income has to be above 23,000 US dollar. Okay, and we hope to maintain that with the level of unemployment rate to be around 4 to 5% at most, and of course we need to have economic growth based on technology. So the good questions here are, how do we translate this into a financial sector? What kind of financial sector that we need, okay, to support this 2045 target? What exactly the size of financial market that needs to be able to complement this economic target? And how do we have a digital transformations to contribute to this development target? Okay, so these are the questions that I'm hoping to answer for the next 20 minutes or so. Now the 2045 target is actually not just a vision of Indonesia. I mean, this is not just a dream. In fact, this is a report that was out by Goldman Sachs. This is an institution that I was working for when I was in Singapore. Goldman is also putting Indonesia by 2050 as the fourth largest country in terms of the GDP size in the world. Yeah, so this is not just the dream of Pak Jokowi, but also is something that seems to be possible, at least by study done by big investment house like Goldman. What are the challenges? The challenge is very straightforward. Yeah? Again, I'm not a good forecaster. What I do basically, let me take a look what happens to the country that has a GDP over 20,000 at this stage. How big is their financial market? And then compare that to Indonesia at this stage. Yeah, so I'm not doing any forecasting. So what I found, for countries that have a GDP over 20,000, usually the nominal asset of their financial sector is at least around 300% of GDP, of their nominal GDP. 300%. Indonesia, by end of 2020, the size of our financial asset, or financial sector, is only less than 120%. Okay, so in less than 20 years, we are 2023 now, the achievement of 2045, so it's for 20 years, we need to almost triple our financial sector. Okay, so it's not a small challenge. And then the second thing also that we learned from the global developed economy is that the financial market has to be broad-based. It cannot be just banking-based only. Yeah, it has to be also broad-based. We need the insurance as a risk mitigation. We also need the pension fund as a source of capital. We cannot always rely on foreign borrowing. Yeah, so lesson number one, financial market has about 300% at least, and it has to be broad-based. Okay. Now what we have right now, if you look at the slide on the pie charts, we are actually not moving on the right directions. What we see right now, the financial market of Indonesia continuously to be built based on the banking system. Our banking continues to be growing, but our insurance and pension having a big problem. This is one challenge. This is becoming even more difficult, even more challenging, because in 20 years, we are entering the aging populations. What does that mean? This is a United Nations data, by the way, not my data. It basically says that by 2040, majority of us, a good chunk of our population will be above the age of 61. Okay? So why it is important? Because when you start aging 61, you start to retire. Right? Less of Indonesian population will be productive age. Okay? So we'll be having a lot more population needing financial services, needing retirement financial services, needing healthcare, yeah, and that will be costly. So we hope that we become a rich country before we age. But that's a big challenge, and that challenge lies within the next 20 odd years. And the second issue also, climate change. ASEAN and Indonesia are among the group of countries that suffer the most with the rising temperature globally. Indonesia is among the most that's suffering. You can look at it from in terms of agriculture productions, in terms of other financial transactions as well. So those are the challenges. So we need to expand, we need to achieve 2045. We are facing population gap, aging population, and climate change has become very costly to us. So those are the macro challenges. And in addition, lessons from the COVID is very straightforward, right? When we need money the most, what happens to the financial investor? They left our countries. It's expected. When we need the most for the budget, foreign holding of our bonds fallen. In 2019, about 40% of government bonds outstanding is being held by foreign investors. By 2021, the number drops to only 14%. Foreign investor left. While we need financing, to deal with COVID, to deal with economic destruction. So when I was working for Committee Presipen under Pak Erlangga, we need massive money. We need more money. Okay? But the foreign investors are not willing to buy our bonds. So what happens? We have to rely on our domestic institutions. Yeah? So the banking taking up, central bank taking up the share. Yeah? But those are not enough. Yeah? We are running out of financing capacity. Yeah? And one thing is quite interesting. If you look at here, Ibu Bapak, yeah? Look at this data here. What it shows basically, anytime we have a loan at risk in the banking system, so when you see credit in the banking system become a problematic, what you see also a rise in the claim in the insurance sector. So insurance become a big part of risk mitigation in the banking system. In fact, if you don't have a capacity of insurance to mitigate the risk in the banking system, we will have a massive NPL increase during COVID. Loan at risk at the end of 2020 in our banking is about over 25%. What does that mean? 25% of total credit by the banking system, which is about 5,500 trillions, are potentially at risk of becoming NPL. So what happened? Some of those claims are being paid by the insurance. Now, insurance of Indonesian economy, if you look at this, is only less than 3%. Less than 9% of the GDP. While the banking is 60% of GDP. Can you imagine a small size of insurance sector are mitigating the risk of the banking system, who are basically 60% of the economy? I'm just talking about banking. I'm not talking about the health. I'm not talking about the other sector of the economy. So the small insurance system, imagine you have an economy with a small insurance system, taking care of big economy. So you have not a stable economy. You potentially have situations where you may have a crisis or you may have an unstable economy. So how do we enhance the strength of our financial system? In particular, how do we enhance our non-bank financial institutions, insurance and banking? This is where technology is coming in. We have to rely on digital technology. In insurance, we have what is known as the InsurTech, combination of the role of insurance on technology, getting funding for the insurance sector through technology. Okay, so there's a lot of pickup in the business of insurance using technological platform. Yeah, so this number shows that globally, the size of InsurTech around the globe. And Indonesia has also become a big major destination for the target of this insurance investor, for technological investor. Maybe Brian can help us on this one. Yeah, by 2021, about 3% of the global insurance technology investor targeting Indonesian insurance. So we need to continuously adopt these technological transformations, digital transformations to take advantage of this. So that's one aspect of digital transformations. We need it to support our deepening of the financial market, of the insurance market. But there are challenges, and I think I don't have to go through every single one of them, but I'm going to look at some of them. I'm sorry, the one that is yellow is actually talking about data, and also in terms of financial inclusions. So we have issues of cyber security, we have issues of financial inclusion, we have issue on data quality. So let me just pick up some of these indicators, especially on this issue. As I said before, the target of microeconomy is not just develop, but also to have a broad-based economic development, including on the issue of financial market. Yeah. Data here shows digital transformation should also result in financial inclusion. What I mean by financial inclusion? In Indonesia, the standard definition of financial inclusion is very straightforward. The number of transactions that percentage of the population of Indonesia can enjoy through technology. Yeah. So here is the numbers are quite big. By 2024, Pak Jokowi wants to have 90% of Indonesian population have access to financial transactions. And that's possible. In the year of 2000, only 2 million of Indonesia have access to internet. By 2019, that number became 170 million. Okay? So financial inclusion is possible through digitalization. But the question is that what type of financial inclusion? Is it just an e-commerce transaction or is something more meaningful? Now, one of the things that I'm trying to work with my dual position as an advisor, staff khusus at Pak Erlangga, and also as head of the IFG Progress, is actually to help with the issue of the use of the digital in supporting insurance to penetrate to the crops insurance. Think about it, Bapak Ibu. We have a subsidy on fertilizer to support our agriculture, right? Now what happened if our farmer fail on their plantation? When they started their plantation, they fail. Let's say this is rice farming. Yeah. They may not be able to replant again because they lost the money. They don't have a big enough money to replant again. Yeah. So if we give them a fertilizer subsidy and they're not even planting, they probably say, I don't need the fertilizer because I don't have the cash to replant. So what they need is a subsidy, an insurance subsidy, so that in case they fail on their first plantations, they can be still having a capital to restart again. Okay, this is financial inclusion. Now you can think about small medium enterprises as well. Yeah. So all this, Brian will be, hopefully can share a bit of his work right now on the informal sector, the role of insurance on the boosting up the informal sector. How do we actually support yang jualan gado-gado, all these street vendors using insurance so that they can have enough capital to continuously going despite of the fact that they may have a up and down on their economic activities. So that's financial inclusion. The problem that we have right now on the financial inclusion, as I said before, most of our access to the internet, on Indonesian case at least, they're mostly for social media. So and also for e-commerce, the simple transactions. So we need to transform that. We need to improve again digital transformation to translate the access to, rising access to the internet access into more meaningful financial inclusion. So that's one challenge. Second challenge, we have seen many of cyber attacks. We have seen many of our data are missing. The recent data is basically loss of data on our passport number. Remember? Just recently happened. Yeah? Many of our banks having also attacks on their data system. The challenge is here. There are two challenges here. Yeah? One of the commitment to this development of the transformation of digital on the financial sector is the management of data. There's an argument here publicly. I used to work for the Institute of International Finance. The argument there is that when you have a data of financial system, for instance, the banking, the insurance, many countries argue that those data has to be localized. We have to create a data center. Data center has to be in Indonesia. So all of those data of the banking system in Indonesia or the financial system in Indonesia will be under that data center in Indonesia. The problem is data center in Indonesia is not big enough. In fact, we did a research in 2021. Microsoft data center in Indonesia amounted to less than 75 megawatt of data capacity. Okay? For countries that has a per capita over 22,000, the size of data center needed is anywhere between 500 to 1,000 megawatt. Okay, so the question is this, Bapak Ibu. Are we going to wait and invest time and money to develop our data center first before we deepen further our financial market? So we stop our financial market development. We first expand our data center capacity. Yeah. Then after that we go with financial deepening. By then it's too late. 2045 is gone. Okay, so there's a debate here. Okay, and in fact, when I was in my office at the IIF, there's a bit of questions. Is it always safer to have the data center in the country, or can you actually have a global financial data center? For instance, one data center for the whole ASEAN. Okay, so this is a big issue as well. But there's a lack of data capacity, data center capacity. And the more digitalized that you need, then you have a whole data center needed. Yeah? So that's another challenge that we face. Another challenge that we face is basically many of the accounting standard, international accounting standard, we call it IFRS, are not requiring that data is actually doing interface. I mean, all these data are being interfaced to technology. Yeah? So if I'm doing a transaction with any one of you, it will be reported in one data center, in one system, immediately. Okay? Otherwise, we have a problem. Many of our insurance right now, for instance, the data that they have on the claim, yeah, for instance, I'm holding an insurance policy. Sometimes I have the data as a customer, but my insurance forgot to include my data on their balance sheet. So they don't even know that I'm one of the policy holder. That it happens a lot. Yeah, transactions are not reported. Yeah, so our system does not have fully captured the size of liabilities. Okay? Now the accounting standard of international required that IFRS 17, the last one here, that has to be applied to the whole insurance system in Indonesia by 2025. Singapore has started in 2023. I think China has started in 2023 as well. Yeah. So that's a problem as well. So that's a challenge as well. But again, I'm quite, let me just have two slides, Ibu. I'm quite confident, or I'm quite optimist. We just passed our omnibus law on financial reforms. This is what I like about this is that one is a very broad base. When we do reform, usually in the financial sector, we focus only in the banking. 1997, we focus only in banking. Now, we're not only looking at banking, we're looking at also financial inclusion. We're also talking about financial technology, fintech. We're also looking at how we reform pension, how we reform insurance sector. Okay? And we're also looking at how we regulate all this conglomerate of institutions. Okay? So, there's a lot of challenge for the next 20-odd years. But again, I think I'm cautiously optimistic, and I think there's a lot of role for digital transformations. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Reza, for very clear and intriguing explanations on the landscape of digital transformation at macro level in Indonesia. I'm thrilled, at the same time worried. So I will get back to you for some questions later on. But now I invite Pak Brian Wong to share his thoughts on this.
Since Pak Reza stood up, I guess I'm going to stand up.
Of course.
I'm going to brave this without my notes. Okay. So, good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a nice lunch. Hope you're going to be awake for our part of the talk. So, as Pak Reza started, he gave a disclaimer that he is not a digital person, but he is a macroeconomist. So I'm going to say that, with my disclaimer, I'm unfortunately not an economist, nor do I have a PhD. So I'm going to speak to you all today as a practitioner, okay, someone who grew up in Silicon Valley and then spent about 20 years in China working in the digital space. And one of the things that I can share with you all is my experience in seeing a society transform. And what I hope to do today is to share with you some of my insights and perspectives that will hopefully provoke thought and questions in your own mind as we think about ASEAN and how ASEAN is embarking on this journey. So I'm not going to try and lecture you all about ASEAN specifically because you're more experts in that area than I am. I'm going to provide a perspective. And what I'm going to do is really kind of go through the first few slides quickly because we all know how much effort has been put into this effort to build a digital ecosystem within ASEAN. Tireless hours have been put into discussions, policy making, and it was very encouraging to see not only the ASEAN Digital Master Plan of 2025, comprehensive details in terms of what is required to address a lot of the issues, but also recently the DIFA agreement that's to be signed to provide for more connectivity within ASEAN, in particular the digital system. So I do believe the ASEAN's digital decade has arrived. I've always been fascinated with what's been happening here. A lot of the digital heroes are native of Indonesia in particular. Gojek, Tokopedia, Bukalapak, all of these are role models for ASEAN because the entrepreneurial spirit is very strong in this region. And so I'm very optimistic about what's ahead. But we also know that there's, so these are all the positive things we know in terms of the aggregate size, the critical mass of internet users, particularly during COVID, that grew at a very fast rate. The existing needs, we talk about the urban-rural divide, and how digital is well placed to address this. The informal economy, which Pak Reza talked about and referenced, is a very big part of the economy, but how do you bring them into the mainstream through technology? And then the amount of support that the governments are paying to digital today provides an opportunity for the region to leapfrog into the new economy. But we're also very cognizant of the challenges, which I won't go into details here, but physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure. One of the things I realized in China, it seemed like it was endless bridges and roads and ports, but you need that infrastructure to move physical product. And then I went to rural areas when I was working there to check out how life was being lived there. 98% of the country now has access to internet through wireless connectivity. So even in villages I had to walk into physically because you couldn't get a car there. They had access to the internet on their mobile phones. So this is very important in terms of connectivity. Obviously, difference in terms of regulatory environments within the 10 countries is key to providing seamless sort of movement and flow, and accessibility through affordability, education, and then of course trust in the technology itself. All these things are impediments that need to be resolved. So I think you're all familiar with those challenges that are talked about quite a bit. But there are two more challenges that have come about in the last year or so that are, I think, at the top of everyone's minds, and Professor Grossman also addressed some of these. One of them is this trend towards deglobalization, what people call decoupling, particularly driven by US and China, but there is this crisis of confidence in terms of what globalization is bringing to societies, and a new attitude towards self-protection and sort of delinking from these dependencies. The other sort of challenge that's come about, or fear, is this rise of AI. And Dr. Lilly talked about this, AI and robots, and AI is coming to take over the world. We hear it quite a bit in the media today. A lot of uncertainty as to where this is all headed. So these two are also challenges on everyone's mind. So I guess I would pose the first question, which is the world really deglobalizing, or is it rather reconfiguring in terms of the connections that are being linked? Because the data that or Professor Grossman showed actually is that despite some of the preconceived notions about the amount of global trade decreasing and things changing, that it actually wasn't materially a massive shift in terms of deglobalization, but rather there was a different sort of trend happening, where maybe goods trade had peaked, but there was something else that was coming about when it comes to services or trade of intangible goods. And what I would contend, then the second question I would raise is that will AI exacerbate the digital divide, or are there ways to use it to create a more level playing field? Okay, so these two questions I think are important to keep in mind when we're thinking about the challenges that are facing us today. And with regard to deglobalization, I was happy to see that the Princeton professor, my conclusions were the same as his. So fortunately, I think that deglobalization is not necessarily something that's happening in a material, significant way. The interconnectivity between trade flows in countries and regions remains very significant, and I think will remain significant because of the needs of different regions providing inputs to the different areas in the world. Whether it's North America's dependence on electronics and basic metals from Asia, or Asia Pacific's dependency on energy resources or materials, but also food products from North America. These are all a reality of what we're living and continue to be. The same is true in the southern regions, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, this great dependency on areas in manufacturing and production from places like Asia and the rest of the world. So I would say that we need to think more about how things are being reconfigured. And one of the things the data shows is that goods trade has maybe plateaued, but it's the intangible goods, the intangible services that are actually increasing in terms of trade flow. And a lot of this actually has to do with not just the services, but something that we all refer to as data. Okay? And so the world is shifting, and the growth is really happening in terms of this cross-border exchange of services and information. And I think that's very significant to think about when you're considering what will the digital economy hold for the future ahead. Okay. So data as a new factor of production for economic input. This is also a question to think about, because if goods and manufacturing were really the drivers of the economy, what does data represent in terms of the opportunity to unlock value within society? Okay. This is something that many governments are talking about. In some, such as China, are even thinking of establishing specific departments around data in order to figure out how to manage data as an economic input for their economies. And all of us are producing data. Every time that you use your mobile phone to give a like on Facebook, or to do a transaction when you buy something on Tokopedia, that's creating data. And actually, data, the more you use it, the more valuable it becomes. And one of the distinctions of data versus, say, natural resources is that data is non-rivalous, means that it can be used across many different groups without being sort of used up, so to speak, and it can be shared almost at zero cost. And so data has other characteristics that traditional sort of goods and products do not have. That make it even more useful as an input for economic development. So that's trade and deglobalization. if we want to talk about AI in terms of how to make it more inclusive, we can go over a few of the arguments that have been made in terms of protecting ourselves from the risks that come with AI. One thing is to make it more accessible. Technology like cloud-based AI services, particularly in emerging markets where companies and individuals don't have the funds to buy their own hardware or to manage or train their own models. Cloud-based AI services make it much more accessible for individuals and small businesses and entrepreneurs. These are services you're seeing from companies like Amazon or Alibaba that are actually providing foundational models for companies to build functions and tools off of cloud-based AI services. Data accessibility, it's very important that both the government and society at large come up with ways and policies to encourage data sharing. So one of the things that governments have is this broad base of public data. And if you use public data in a way to do predictive analysis or to analyze markets, that will be very useful for companies and enterprises. At the same time, how do you get enterprises to be more willing to share their anonymized data with the market as a whole in order to create more value together? This is also very important. Government incentives can play a big role in terms of spurring companies to use AI. When e-commerce was first emerging, I remember in places like China, but also in emerging markets like Turkey or Korea, where we used to do business at Alibaba, the government would actually provide subsidies to incentivize small, medium-sized businesses to use e-commerce. It is very possible that governments can encourage businesses to use AI tools by providing subsidy and incentivizing them to adopt this technology. This way, AI becomes an everyday part of their toolkit. But if you don't encourage them to do it, then companies might be hesitant to adopt this new technology. And then finally, we use the word ethical quite a bit when talking about AI. And what does that mean? A lot of people probably have heard about the natural bias that comes with AI because of the data sets. It's important to protect society and individuals and groups from being harmed by this AI because of the implicit bias that comes with data sets. It's also very important to encourage kind of the broad-based use of this AI across society instead of just special groups so that it is fairly distributed and equally accessed. So ethical AI development is important, and it should be the thing that guides governments in terms of their policies and regulations on how to manage its development in society. And then finally, Professor Grossman used the word complementary education, AI complementary education and training. And one of the things we all realize that AI is quickly taking up a lot of roles and functions that humans would do previously, both in terms of the learning process but also in terms of functionality. And the question is, how do you adapt educational programs to fit what is emerging in terms of the AI functions and tools and abilities for the future? So that is really kind of ways to protect ourselves or manage AI. And I think that the future of AI will be greatly influenced by how these companies and individuals decide to use it. And there's lots of ways that you can break it up, such as the public and private domain. Some people say that individuals in the future are going to walk around with their own individual AI sort of engines that help them make decisions on an individual basis, as opposed to ChatGPT, which is a public AI tool that everybody contributes their data to. Another way to look at it is horizontal and vertical. So specific industries are going to have large language models just to help them make decisions within their specific domains and industries, whereas there are those that kind of cover society at large. And then industrial versus consumer. One of the things that's been very interesting is how quickly China has adapted AI to industrial use. It has been less concerned about consumer use and trying to answer complex questions about, like, I don't know, who's the perfect boyfriend, that would be for your friend. they're more focused on how do you optimize functions within supply chains and manufacturing. And so this is also going to be one of the big distinctions. But what I really want to emphasize in today's talk, if there's anything you guys take away from this, is that digital transformation is not just about skill sets, not just about technology, it's also about mindset. And what I'm going to do in the rest of this presentation is fly through a few case studies to show you how this mindset actually impacts how businesses are formed and structured in this new digital era. So when we think about the traditional supply chain, there are a few key players, and oftentimes these operate in a linear fashion. In a platform model, which really kind of is the first iteration of this digital sort of landscape, it's all these players kind of work together in sync, in kind of simultaneously. And so the middleman is no longer adding value. It's really about adding value through identifying customer needs and being customer-centric, but also operating at a very rapid pace. And so hierarchical organizations, top-down, are no longer efficient. Things operate in clusters, and teams will have multiple connections between one another versus trying to do a one-way sort of top-down type flow. And so one of the things that you see happening are these organizations or these systems where all the data is actually driving decisions that are made within these operations. On the left, this is a textile operation that is taking data real time and producing small batches of products based on customer sort of feedbacks, batches of 50 to 500. And they're able to serve not just large companies' demand, but also small companies, and provide small batches at highly customized levels for these orders. On the right is a smart logistics warehouse that Cainiao, which is an Alibaba logistics company, has created. That's all automated, that not only operates efficiently, but also by being so efficient and so precise in how they manage these orders, they're able to provide that cost savings onto the vendors, the merchants themselves, thereby reducing delivery times and cost of logistics overall. But what I really want to do is get into one example called Rest Duvet. This is a company which I am one of the Alibaba partners really spun out based on the learnings of the digital economy. And this company is very interesting because it represents what I think is the future of sort of commerce. It was started by 3 founders, one Canadian, one Chinese, and one American. And now they have 28 members on the team, located in 11 countries. So for 2 years, for the first year, this team never met in person. They actually created virtually. But what they did was actually built a business off of a understood demand around a very, what most people say, boring product called duvets. But they identified a market need based on data analysis, and then actually created this company that today is within the first 12 months is generating at a run rate of $30 million US, and has 150,000 customers within their database. And they've got employees, 11 countries from China to US to Canada to Vietnam to Philippines and even Kenya. And they've done such a good job in terms of identifying their market segments. This product is a duvet that actually is a cooling blanket, so it's a special fabric that actually is cool to touch. It's got a certain weighting that meets the needs, because a lot of people, they don't sleep well because the blankets are too light. And they found a market need in terms of athletes who sleep hot because they're so active in terms of the sport. Menopause women, this is a common problem with menopause women who sleep hot, but it was never addressed in the market. Pregnant women and children. And by taking this market insights and analyzing data, one of the interesting things is they actually analyzed all the complaints on Amazon of people who bought duvets and saw those as pain points, and then figured out through research how to develop a product to address that need. And they've gotten all this international recognition in the United States, in the UK, Better Housekeeping, Healthline, Women's Health, Forbes. In their first 3 months, they got this recognition. They've been on television. But this is all created through a company that is globally distributed. And so all this happens because of data that they use to monitor, evaluate, analyze, optimize, and reiterate. And because of the efficiency in production, it only requires what normally takes 12 weeks in terms of lead time for production. It takes 1 week. They can do minimum order quantities very efficiently from 500 to 5,000. And they can continuously iterate the product and improve it based on the feedback from the customers. So this is an example of a new generation of company that's built purely on data that then is driven to create a product that the market needs based on the data analysis. And so the thing that's required in order to create companies like this in the new age is really, as I talked about previously, having the right digital infrastructure in place, the right network connectivity, making it affordable in terms of the computing power, and also interoperability across different regions. Then that's when you have this transformation that takes place in society. Whether it's the rise of D2C, this company we refer to as a D2C brand, direct to consumer, because they're no longer going on Amazon or eBay or Alibaba to sell products. They're actually going directly to customers and marketing to them. That's the rise of this D2C trend. You guys know this company, Shane, I'm sure, that's blown up in the West. So that's one example of digital transformation. AI is not just large language models controlled by big tech, but also it's being used in companies of this size to drive functionality, insights, and analysis. And then finally, this is an opportunity for countries to leapfrog, emerging market countries to leapfrog into the new digital era and create these new generation of companies that are much more successful because of the technology. I'm sorry, I know I'm over. I gotta go into my final section. Okay, so these are the prerequisites. I often talk as part of my work to other groups about the prerequisites that are required for any digital economy. And I use China as an example of all the different factors that played a role into creating an enabling environment for the rise of its digital economy. And that's everything that we've talked about already, from the population size, the social stability, the physical and internet infrastructure, but also the education system, the government policies, and then external factors. In the case of China, one of the things that really spurred their economy was the accession to the WTO. Okay, what's happening in ASEAN today is this geopolitical tension between US and China. I think of that as a positive thing for ASEAN, because ASEAN will benefit from inward investment. It will benefit from better trade agreements, and as a result, will have this opportunity to thrive. And so one of the other things I talk about often with governments and organizations and entrepreneurs is how all the different elements within society need to fit together in a coordinated fashion. Whether it's the government policies at the top, the entrepreneurs who build the platforms like the DanaPays, the Tokopedias, the Gojeks, and then the merchants and the businesses that use those platforms, and then the talent that drives this, the professionals and the students, those all have to be aligned in order to create a thriving digital economy. And this is something that we've spent years teaching to different groups, whether it's in Southeast Asia, Africa, or the Middle East. Then finally, I'm going to just summarize with a few examples that I think are quite special. E-fisheries. How many people have heard of e-fisheries here? So this is one of the heroes in Indonesia, and not just because they raised $200 million in their last Series D, but because this entrepreneur decided to focus on something that no one else thought was even worth the time, which is the aquaculture industry. And for him, he said, everybody's creating startups to address like all these other industries like, e-commerce and health and finance, but nobody's looking at this fisheries business. But it actually is one of the largest industries in Indonesia. And Indonesia is the world's second largest producer of aqua products in the world, second to China. But even China didn't come up with this model. So e-fisheries is an amazing platform that not only facilitates buying and selling of aqua products, but also the harvesting and the nurturing and raising of aquaculture, especially fish. So they use AI to monitor feeding of the fish, which is one of the biggest areas of waste in terms of resources, but also creates water pollution when you overfeed them and the overspill goes into the ocean, into the water. And so feeding is one area. Water monitoring through AI is another, to ensure that the water is at a balanced pH. And then disease management through AI sort of imagery. They can identify when fish are sick and use preventative measures to save the whole crop. So that's e-fisheries, which is evidence of how this space has been benefited from technology, and one that produces lots of jobs and industries for Indonesia. Glints is a talent ecosystem based in Singapore, but serving all of Southeast Asia. They use AI to not only identify talent for jobs and placement, but also to help with the whole process of recruitment and customer service. Again, Glints is a startup. I mean, it's done quite well over the last few years, but companies of this size can use AI to drive things like human resource management and talent development. Policy Street is the company I mentioned to Reza, which is a insurance tech company. Now, this was founded by some ex-investment bankers who worked in Singapore, but after going through our program at Alibaba, they were inspired to see what technology was doing for rural areas and those who were not being served. So they decided to serve the B40, the informal economy. So this is a company that actually provides accident and health insurance to all the delivery drivers in many of the Southeast Asian countries. They serve Food Panda, Grab, a number of these companies where these workers are not covered and protected. So they use AI to actually assess risk profiles and do underwriting assessments for the insurance programs that they run, plus a number of other functions that help them run more efficiently their insurance business. And then finally, the Ford School is based in Penang, but it was created to actually not only train high school graduates who want to learn technical skills for the future, but also those who are mid-career that want to transition from traditional into tech. And they basically teach all the skills necessary to better understand how to prepare themselves for the digital industry, but particularly in machine learning and AI. And one of the things they pointed out is that there is increasing demand from companies overseas. Moneyline is one example. It's a US-based company that's looking to recruit in places like Malaysia and Southeast Asia for their data scientists. So this whole thing about cross-border service trade and data trade is very much real, and Southeast Asia can benefit from this because even developed markets like the United States are looking to hire talent in places like Southeast Asia, and these schools are the ones that are training them for that. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up with the 5 things that I think are very important for digital readiness. We all know about ubiquitous connectivity we talked about, enabling inter-ASEAN flows, which I think we're already focusing on through a lot of the ASEAN initiatives, but data flow should definitely be part of that in addition to the financial and product flow. Strengthen the public-private partnerships because these two need to work together. The government needs to create the enabling environment. The businesses need to build the businesses to promote the economy. Data as a new factor of production. And then finally, the blue ocean approach. ASEAN is situated very strategically between the East and West, and they should use this opportunity to select the best from both Silicon Valley and what's happening in Asia, and use that to apply to their needs. So thank you very much, and I'm sorry for going over.
Thank you, Pak Brian, for offering the perspective, especially on interplay among key stakeholders in digitalizations. And I would like to invite Ibu Fitria that she will share with us about what Indonesia has done in digital payment transformations in payment systems. Please, Ibu Fitria.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Fau, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Selamat sore, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and allow me to sit throughout this presentation journey because it is easier for me to access the note and easier when you are in heels. So it is an honor, of course, to speak before you guys, the distinguished participants and also prominent speakers here. And allow me to share about digital transformation in payment system, what we see and also what we do in the central bank to accelerate it. Yes. Okay, now let me start with the digital potential of Indonesia. That as we see that the demographic structure of Indonesia dominated by younger digital generations, there is a significant driving factor for the development of the digital ecosystem in the future. And we can see here that from our population, 70% are in productive age, and the internet users has 77% penetration. So this is the fourth biggest in the world, actually, for the internet users and the penetration. And we also witnessed the shift in preference towards digital that is getting stronger during the pandemic. So it is quite a blessing in disguise, actually. So now we have 98% merchant that uses digital payment, and among them 91% merchant Kris are also SMEs. So it is quite accelerating, and we can also see the result in the digital payment that is growing at an accelerating rate. We can see Kris or digital banking and electronic money has been increasing very fastly. So again, I guess nowadays we are more worried when we, leaving our wallet at home, rather leaving our mobile phone, of course, rather than leaving our wallet at home. Okay, so next one. Yeah. Okay, so as a response for the global development, for the global digital trend and also development, Bank Indonesia has launched in 2019 the Indonesia Payment System Blueprint 2025, which is the policy direction of Bank Indonesia in responding to the development of digital economy and finance. And this blueprint has 5 visions. The first one is National Digital Financial Economy Integration. So this is how to build a digital ecosystem here in Indonesia. And the second one is digital banking transformation, of course, for us to keep up with the global financial trend. And also the interlink of fintech and banks, of course, to get optimal benefit of each other presence in digital ecosystem. And the fourth one, this is I think this is very important, to balance innovation and also the risk mitigation. Because we know that the greater the innovation is, the riskier, of course, that we can find. And the fifth one is national interest on cross-border. So there is this principle of reciprocalities, of course, among countries, and it has to be, pro-domestic growth, of course, for the policy. So for implementation of the blueprint or the BSPI 2025 or Indonesia Payment System Blueprint 2025, the implementation has come with 5 working groups. We categorize it in 5 working groups. The first one is Open API, and then retail payment, wholesale payment, and FMI, and then data and digital ID for working group 4, and working group 5 for regulatory reform. Yes. Okay. So what we have come so far with the blueprint in payment system here. So 3 years after the launch of the blueprint, we have various important milestones that have been achieved. We have regulatory reform here. The reform is simply like integrated and simplified regulation from hundreds of regulation to one umbrella regulation, which is the Bank Indonesia regulation on payment system. And then throughout the years, we already also have the direct another regulations, the derivative of the umbrella regulation, while still keeping it simple and also strategic. And the second one, the second achievement is on standard. We see that we have CRIS now, the QR code for Indonesia standard, and also SNAP, the national standard for payment API here. CRIS has been launched in 2019, while SNAP is launched in 2021. And also for retail payment infrastructure, we already have BFAST, or our fast payment system here, and also we have Kartu Kredit Indonesia, or domestic credit card that is processed here in the domestic. And for now, the segment is for the government to use it for their transactions. Okay. So let me give you a picture of the realization of the digital payments for financial inclusion here. So COVID-19 pandemic has changed people's behavior in conducting their economic activities, of course. If you can see the digital financial services in numbers, so 21 million, there are 21 million for new digital customers since the pandemic. And then 59% of digital merchants accessing digital financing, so it is quite good numbers. And then 72% new consumers outside major cities, so not only Jawa, Bali, but also outside major cities. And 98% of digital merchants accessing digital payments. And if we see the key roles here is SMEs, there are almost 70 million of SMEs here, and they contribute to 62% to our GDP and 97% of labor force here. And there are three key drivers making this happen. The first one, that banks continue to undergo this digital transformation. So they are not, stay in the old comfortable service, they go on digital. The second one is collaboration between banks and fintech, so they can take benefit of each other's. And the third one is the rapid pace of e-commerce transactions alongside innovations. So you know that in e-commerce we can find people selling like clothes, food, groceries, even experience for traveling and whatever. Okay, so here's the examples of CRIS. The achievement of CRIS, this is our darling here. So CRIS has been growing rapidly. CRIS is also a game changer in payment, and it is also an entry point for merchant and for users for the digital ecosystem. Because once you have CRIS, you have to have bank account, and when you have bank account, you can access to like financing, investment, etc. So the total users of CRIS now is 37 million as of June 2023, and it is quite high from our target in 2023 for 45 million. And there are also almost 27 million merchants that use CRIS, and 91% of them is the merchant from SMEs. And if you can see here in terms of volume, 83% of the volume here, the transactions are from SMEs as well. Next one is the achievement for BFAST, or Bank Indonesia Fast Payment System here. So after we launched it in end of 2021, so we see the transaction of credit transfer that BFAST has processed. It is grow very rapidly. So BFAST has served or processed almost 470 million transactions. That is valued in more than 1,300 trillion rupiah here. And participants also keep increasing. BFAST now have 122 participants, which are 121 banks and one other party. and that covers 94% of the market size of retail payment system here. And BFAST also will continue to be developed. In 2021, the feature is individual credit transfer. And in 2023, later, we also will launch the phase 2 with the bulk credit, direct debit, and the request for payment features. And along that way, maybe 2025, we will have the expansion of services, including cross-border. Next achievement in retail payment system is P2DD, or Regional Digitalization Acceleration and Expansion Program. This is actually our program of digitalization for expanding, digitalization across all regions in Indonesia in collaboration with the government and also payment system industry. You can see here that the electronification or digitalization that we built an index here for a local government transaction. So the ETPD index achievement also grows significantly. From 2021, there were 115 digital regional government. It is like maybe 20% of it, because we now have more than 500 regional governments. And recently in 2022, there are already 366 regional government that is, going digital, and that is, if I'm not mistaken, is 60% of the total of the regional governments. And also with the digitalization of local government transaction, they also have to use CRIS implementation and also domestic credit card or Kartu Kredit Indonesia. And we also developed this KKI with industry. And for the first phase in 2022, KKI has been using the CRIS channel. And then for phase 2 in first quarter in 2023, we already established KKI card using physical card. And for phase 3 in the future, we will use KKI for online payment. And we also envision about the digitalization on transportation, which, to make integration of transportation mode with also integrated payment system in the future. Okay, next is our current policy response here, that if we can present it in 3 pillars here, that payment system digitalization strategy is to expand a digital economic and financial inclusion. The first one in the first pillar is the growth. We will do it by accelerating CRIS, by expanding the innovative features, of course, of CRIS Tuntas. We will launch it in the near future here, as well as expanding cross-border CRIS payment, and also hosting National CRIS Week or Pekan CRIS Nasional, and also Fair B for Indonesia Sovereign Rupiah Festival throughout our Indonesia region. And for inclusivity, we also strengthen the CRIS merchant discount rate here. And for policy coordination, of course, we're still going on with the policy coordination with the government, and also with some programs for ministries and agencies. Okay, going to the future about regional payment connectivity. So what are next? So this is the first thing to do. So Southeast Asian countries have already taken a step ahead in payment connectivity, which has been growing in recent years, of course, through bilateral arrangement currently, especially among 5 Southeast Asian central banks. And of course, the goals is to achieve strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive economic growth and development. So synergy among central bank here, we have 5 agenda here, but the low-hanging fruits, the first one is widening of QR payment partnerships among those 5 countries, and of course it will expand in the future. And the second one is interlinking fast payment, so BFAST and other fast payment system in the many central banks will go interlinking, and then standardizing API, and then RTGS interlinking and data framework here. Okay, next one. This regional payment connectivity starts with 5 central banks as first movers to maintain high degree of controllability, of course. The MOU signing among governors has been conducted at the side event of G20 in Bali, November 2022. So the benefits that we want to achieve is, of course, the shorter transaction chain, so that transaction cost can be involved in advance, so it is quite transparent, and then faster transaction, of course, and the fast payment system and retail payment system in each country can be connected seamlessly and transparently. Of course, there are challenges here, like long and unstandardized transaction stages. In example, currency conversion, and also compliance checks, and also different messaging format, processing, etc. So in 2022, we start with cross-border implementation, and then in 2025, we will start the development, and hopefully we can see the piloting or implementation of fast payment system interlinking, and also expansion of channels. Next one, with the QR cross-border here, that we have implemented our QR cross-border relationship with Thailand and also with Malaysia. Thailand since last year, and Malaysia just this July. And the next in our stage is Singapore. It is now in the development, and China and India, we have approached them for our MOU. Okay, now the last one is Garuda project. It is, we want to navigate the architecture of our digital rupiah, and this is the Garuda project white paper that you can scan here. So we have finished with our consultative paper, and we are open to public for comments, for input and feedback and whatever. And we are going to the next process of proof of concept here. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. So let me close it maybe with with a quote that will fit to our digital transformation, with that to have all the benefits for the digitalization from Helen Keller, that alone we can do so little, but together, of course, we can do so much. So collaboration, I guess, from authorities, from industry, and from association industry is also of importance. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputi, for sharing with us behind the policy behind what we are enjoying now, and the plan for the future. Before asking for the questions, before collecting questions from the participants, I'd like to have some. First, that again, the materials of this in this session could be downloaded by scanning the QR code on your ID card. But I'd like to have some 2 minutes each with each speakers about some clarifications and elaborations. First with Pak Reza. Development opportunities versus youth challenge for Indonesia during a tight time to achieve some indicative targets that you mentioned as a high income countries wannabe. What are key steps that government should do, and how it should be coordinated with other ASEAN member states? Your comment, please.
Thank you. Again, the message is very straightforward. We have a dream of becoming a developed economy, and it is something that is possible still. But like our colleague just mentioned, this is a leap forward. This is something that is basically, we have less than 20 years because of populations, of the aging populations. To do so, we need a broad-based, not only deep, but also broad-based financial system, financial sector. Yeah, we need to triple our financial sector, and we need also to engage with our insurance and pensions. Yeah, again, risk mitigation is critical. A lot of this basically has to be done through the insurance, and pension is critical. The big financing cannot be relying on the global market. Banking system cannot just rely on the global bank financial market. Even FDI, it is a public debt. Yeah, so when you think about FDI, that's the external debt, because it is something that you have to pay. So we need to create our domestic capacity, which is pension fund. In addition, on the size, broad base, we also need to have our equity distributions. Yeah, we don't want to be developing and then we have a gap between the poor and the rich. Here we need to have the penetrations of our financial system into the small, medium enterprises, the micro level, and also across formal and informal sector of the economy. Yeah, so this is again, that's another challenge. And last but not least, we need to have a safety net. We do want to have a process where this financial market can also be a safe one, not a one that is exposed to the volatility and global financial crisis. So those are basically the challenges that we face. And digital transformation is the one area that I think we can be able to rely on to solve some of this problem. But again, this is something that has to be done coordinatedly, not only just in Indonesia, but also in ASEAN and also in global. Again, some of these transactions are not being done locally. Yeah, as what Bank Indonesia colleague has mentioned, this is basically a global effort, regional effort. So these are something that also we have to do. Whatever challenge that I just mentioned has to be also somewhat duplicate and replicate across ASEAN, so that we can actually have a more stable and developed economy. But just one quick end on this one. The crisis that we face, including COVID-19, highlighted how much macroeconomic policy have helped us in terms of passing through the crisis. But remember, as your financial market tripled, yeah, the role of macroeconomic policy is just to smooth the volatility. It's not solving the volatility. And the volatility is going to be larger than what we see with the deepening of your financial market, with enlarging of your financial market. So the key to solve that volatility or reduce that volatility is institutional capacity. That institutional capacity including on our financial system and digitalization.
Interesting, Pak Reza. I think we can ask many questions following your explanation, but maybe we can get back later on. Pak Brian, I would like to ask you one question that you mentioned in that the new economy in the future will now will have an open and agile structures. Given the diverse state of the digital state in ASEAN, we could see it a big opportunity, but on the other hand, it could also potentially widening the digital gap. How do you see it, and how your suggestions for the ASEAN leaders?
Yeah, I think the key to the technology and how to use it is really, as we talked about, is mindset, but how entrepreneurs can imagine what they can do without the standard restrictions that normally govern them, whether it's your location or your capabilities. So the hope is that, one of the interesting things about e-fisheries, the founder said that he had to go and convince so many fishermen to use his technology because they didn't understand why it was relevant. And when we launched, I remember at Alibaba, the very first product, which was just a website for companies, a lot of the small, medium-sized manufacturers didn't believe the internet could help them. But once they did, suddenly it opened up an entire new world to them, where they were selling cross-border, they were selling to markets they never imagined. When it comes to something like e-fisheries, it frees them from having to be physically present there to feed the fish or to monitor the fish. And that gives entrepreneurs many more choices in terms of how they live their lives, how they run their businesses, and what kind of markets that they access. So I think a big part of it is attitudinal. And then the other thing is that if you think about what's happening with this cross-border data flows and intangible goods or data goods, the fact that a U.S. company is hiring data scientists in Malaysia or Southeast Asia, normally you would have thought it's the other way around, where you have to find that kind of talent in the developed markets. But if you have the right capacity building programs and you can develop that talent in these areas, and hopefully the gap will not exacerbate, but you actually close that gap. And so whether it's wealth creation or knowledge, raising the skill set, I think that will contribute to a better distribution of this opportunity.
It's like to educate and is to share, right? Yeah, to educate and people knows the opportunity and then to share this opportunity. Yeah. Thank you, Pak Bran. And I would like to ask Ibu Fitria to share us about the Bank Indonesia's plan and the status of the progress for coordinating among the ASEAN countries and also the challenges.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. So this regional payment connectivity that we envision here in the next maybe 5 years, we will do it, of course, in steps, not in like big bangs. So the low-hanging fruits is interlinking the QR payment, the widening of the QR payment, like Chris with like PayNet and whatever in Asia. Currently, countries in the ASEAN have been, having this agreement bilaterally. But now we want to have it in, all Asian countries interlinking with the QR payment. That's the first step. And the second one is fast payment system interlinking. This is, of course, much more difficult because the challenge is always in the integration of, different system, different language of the system, and of course different regulation and of course different objectives of each countries. So we are now in the phase of capability buildings for the resource. Like we have among us share for our experience for each other, and then the second step we will move with the sitting together for our regulations, understanding and things like that. So I guess that's the steps.
Thank you, Fitria. And I would like to invite questions or comments from the floor. Perhaps 3 questions first. Please introduce your name and institutions briefly and to whom your questions directed.
My name is Linga from BK Ministry of Trade. Maybe my questions will suit to Brian and to Fitria. Now we, in digital transformation, we observe how digital transformations on finance, payment and services more facilitate the people to consume something, but not to facilitate people to behave responsibly, or maybe if we connect to the insurance to save the money. It's like when you open the digital market finance to people, like we got problem with the pinjol, for example. They didn't use the money in a productive way. So what is our strategy to change the behavior of people? I simply say to do more saving, because if we look at how developed country they can do investment on the high tech, they need a lot of money. How China put the very high property price to give the government a lot of money to do investment on the state-owned companies. So how could Indonesia can educate through the digital transformation, educate the people? Because we look at the structure of Indonesian economy, the consumption is more the majority. Thank you.
Thank you, but I would like to collect all the questions, so perhaps they have some links. Second question.
Thank you. My name is Leo from Ministry of Trade. Speaking of digital economic transformation, I want to ask all the panels about maybe issues that we have been quiet for the past 1 year or two, which is blockchain and cryptocurrency. I don't know, maybe since the emergence of ChatGPT, people everywhere talking about AI and blockchain, who was the prima donna between in 2 years before, seems a little bit quiet like now, and I want the opinion of all the panels. Is this technology still has as promising future? Because we were talking about financial inclusion before. The blockchain is the solution. But Reza, maybe correct me if I'm wrong. Is this still the solution? Is this still feasible in the future? And like for micro insurance, for data security, for issues like that, is blockchain and the cryptocurrency still worth working on seriously? And particularly maybe to Ibu Fitria, also I want to know the perspective from Bank Indonesia about the blockchain and cryptocurrency. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak. Interesting. And next questions.
Baik, terima kasih. Saya dalam bahasa Indonesia saja, Bu. Nama saya Japanpi dari Beta Perda. Mau nanya kepada Ibu Fitria. Tadi Ibu menyebutkan Kris ya, Bu ya, sukses gitu ya, Bu ya, bahkan sudah ada kerjasama dengan negara lain begitu. Nah itu Kris itu kan awalnya memang dari produk sandbox ya, Bu ya. Ya, jadi artinya memang teknologi ini berkembang sangat maju dibandingkan dengan regulatori yang ada begitu ya, Bu. Kami juga sebenarnya ada, Bu, untuk dari Kementerian Perdagangan untuk membuat suatu regulatori sandbox tersebut. Nah ini untuk yang sekarang ini, Bu, kan produknya dari sandbox kan yang sukses nih Kris ya, Bu ya. Terutama saya, Bu ya, kami ingin mengetahui bagaimana perkembangannya sekarang dengan inovator-inovator yang berdatangan ke BI begitu, yang bisa diakomodir dalam sandbox tersebut gitu. Ini seperti apa, Bu, gitu, maksudnya apakah membludak sekarang seperti itu ya, Bu ya, karena kan sekarang sudah berlomba-lomba untuk ikut dalam perkembangan digital ekonomi. Mungkin dari saya demikian, terima kasih.
Thank you, Ibu. I think almost all questions are related and relevant with our speakers now. Yeah. So the first one is on the education versus moral hazard versus utilization, positive utilization of the digital transformations, and second on the blockchain's prospects, and the third one on the Kris versus the progress of Kris vis-a-vis other subsequent innovations. Yeah. Allow me to invite who was first, and we can have more interactive. Not really on the hierarchical. Who will answer first? Pak Brian? Oh, Ibu Fitria.
Okay, thank you. So I guess I will answer first about the. I guess it is related to your presentations before for the digital mindset and behavior rather than skill. It is tend to be mindset and behavior, and I agree on that. On the other side, like Bank Indonesia, we are the authority of payment system, and our objective is to make the payment system that are cemumuah, cepat, mudah, murah, aman, nyaman dan andal. Jadi itu cemumuah gitu. Jadi harus sambil sedikit monyong-monyong. Nah, untuk BI cemumuah ini, of course, kenyamanan itu, comfortability also comes with the moral hazard of consuming products. But Kris facilitates for both parties, consumer and producer, buyer and seller, and then also how do you say that, supply and demand, of course. So it facilitates whatever you want to do. But in digital area, I guess we now have digital budgeting, right, and building digital mindset with application and whatever. So there are balancing application somewhere out there. So that's the first one. And also, Chris, as I said, is an entry point for its users, merchant or consumer or whatever, to other financial product, such as financing, investing, and whatever. So it makes easier. And also for merchant, while they are using Chris, their transactions are tercatat, administered neatly, so they can using it for credit profile, and then they also can use it for ambil kredit di bank. Jadi the beauty of Chris juga sampai ke situ. Oke, lalu kemudian crypto. So it is stipulated in our law that rupiah is the only payment tools, of course, only rupiah. So crypto asset is not a currency. We cannot see it as a currency, but it is also an asset. So Kemendak dan Bapepti, of course, is the authorization for this. So I guess our stance is clear on that. And for the blockchain, we are using it. We are analyzing it, of course, for our Garuda project, for digital rupiah, for retail and wholesale. And you can see it, I guess, from the white paper that is stated there. And then the Chris Sandbox gitu. Jadi memang dalam perjalanannya Chris ini adalah hasil sandbox yang paling paten lah istilahnya pada saat itu. Jadi kita uji bersama dengan industri gitu ya. Dalam hal ini ASPI bersama beberapa bank, dan kita lihat bahwa pilotingnya sukses gitu ya, sehingga kita bisa jalan udah cocok dengan regulatory, dengan inovatori dan sebagainya. Nah pada saat ini untuk sandbox kita ini juga mendukung apabila banyak fintech atau banyak inovasi-inovasi yang akan mengajukan perizinan atau persetujuan ke Bank Indonesia. Jadi semua inovasi sistem pembayaran apabila dia masuk ke dalam area sistem pembayaran, mereka harus minta izin ke kita. Dan kalau mereka ingin mengembangkan fitur dari izin yang mereka sudah ada, mereka perlu persetujuan dari Bank Indonesia. Gitu. Nah, jadi kalau mereka sudah masuk ke sandbox, jadi sandbox ini bukan wajib, Bu, bisa dimanfaatkan. Nah, jadi ketika dia masuk sandbox, paling tidak proses persetujuannya sudah akan bisa lebih cepat karena kita udah tahu pilotingnya sudah sukses atau tidak. Kalau dia dalam batch 1 dia tidak bisa, maksudnya masih gagal, dia bisa mengulang di sebelumnya, jadi sampai 2 kali. Gitu. Nah, saat ini apakah rame? Ya, yang mengajukan perizinan dan persetujuan suka memanfaatkan seperti itu. Jadi mungkin ya itu. Bersamaan dengan inovasi selalu come with risk, jadi kita harus memitigasi. Jadi kita inginnya, mari coba kita lihat bareng-bareng. Jadi pre-consultative meeting itu selalu ada di perizinan dan persetujuan, dan termasuk kita lihat proses pilotingnya di sandbox place.
Thank you, Bu Fitria. Pak Brian.
So I'll answer 2 questions. The first question about digitization and consumption. I think what you're getting at is a lot of these applications promote spending money, but how about productivity? Is that right? The question. So China went through this process, and I think there is the risk of hyperconsumption, especially when you have these buying festivals. We have something called Singles Day, and they spend like billions of dollars, like 78 or 83 billion dollars. Imagine that in one day spent online. But one of the things you have to realize is to build trust and understanding in a technology is people have to use it. And oftentimes the first step is consumption. And then what they move towards is productivity. And this happened in the rural areas. So there's thousands of villages right now in China that use e-commerce to actually generate income. And some of these, I'm not kidding, are billions of US dollars. They've completely changed the economic landscape of these areas because they've become massive clusters of economic production. But in order to educate these groups, you had to first get them on board by allowing them to buy things online. So that is a development process. The second thing I would say is with banking services, financial inclusion, one of the great things that happens when they start to use this technology is they learn actually how to invest. So one of the things that happened in China, there was something called Yuebao. In 2014, they launched a money market savings account. Now imagine in America, you have to have a minimum balance, I think is like $5,000 or $2,000 US dollars to even open a brokerage account, and then you can put it in a money market fund. And maybe that you get like 1 or 2%. In China, what happened is they had these digital wallets, and they decided Alipay, which was a subsidiary of Alibaba at the time, decided to create a money market fund, which was basically an account where you can accrue interest at the rate of the interbank lending rate. And at that time, it was about, the traditional banks were paying 1%, and this Yuebao account was paying 5%. So within 8 months, it became the third largest money market fund in the world. There's $180 billion that flowed into these accounts because people realized they could actually generate 5% income off this money market fund. So that introduced them to financial products. So I think the value of the technology is it gives people access to things and tools they would never have. And hopefully you can modify the behavior so you have a balance. Now, the final thing I would say on that is you can actually influence behavior through technology, through things like gamification. So it's not financial literacy that we're doing, although we probably could create some sort of financial literacy gamification to teach people how to manage money, which maybe you guys should do. But when it comes to environmental consciousness, there is an app, I don't know if you guys have heard of it, called Ant Forest for Alipay. So on this application, it tracks your behavior. So if you walk or if you ride a bicycle, you actually accrue carbon credits on a personal ledger. And then you can actually take those carbon credits and contribute it to planting a tree in the Gobi Desert, for example, or saving sea life in like the ocean. And up to today, there are 600 million users of this application called Ant Forest. And they've planted over 350 million trees in the Gobi Desert. So if you imagine, and it's gamification because you compete with your friends who has the most carbon credits, and you can actually steal your friends' carbon credits if they don't actually use them. So it becomes really fun, and you get really mad when somebody takes your credits. So this application, by the way, was recognized by the United Nations as a breakthrough in terms of technology and promoting, socially responsible behavior. Okay, so that's your first question. The second, with regard to crypto, this is my personal opinion. And by the way, I don't represent Alibaba any longer. I don't work at the company. So don't quote me about my comments on crypto attributed to Alibaba. But I think crypto inherently has no societal value. I think it's a speculative tool. I think what's very interesting, if you look at a country like China, they banned crypto, but they have the highest number of blockchain applications in the world. Okay, so that says to you that the value, perceived value, is not in the crypto, it's in the blockchain. But crypto is used as a token in the blockchain, but you can't speculate on it. So I think that's the distinction, and the reason why crypto probably hasn't gotten a lot of attention is people realized it was nothing more than a big bubble, but where the value is really in the underlying technology, which I think still has lots of value. And people are using it in logistics and other things. Blockchain, as proof of stake and all this, like they use it for practical, functional purposes.
Thank you, Pak Brian, Reza, and also because there's a question directed to you, would you like to, altogether answer?
Yeah, let me start with the questions on commercial e-commerce. I'm not too worried about the impact on our consumptions. Because again, consumptions of 270 million people is going to be always going to be the big part of our Indonesian economy. So right now it's about 55% of our GDP is on the private consumptions. In fact, I think the technology help us expand the choice on consumptions, and that I think is the positive implications. And again, whenever you have a consumption, there's always going to be the other side of the consumption, which is the producer. You cannot just consume without expanding the producer. Yeah? So I see that as two sides of the same coin. If you look at Gojek, for instance, it's driven based on commerce, but it created a lot of production and productivity activities on the other side of the equations. But I agree with you that how do we ensure that there's a consumer protections? How do you ensure that you have a quality consumption facility that we can provide through this digitalization? For instance, we've been trying to work on this on the insurance side again. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of complaints about sometimes transactions that we do in the e-commerce. A bogus one. Yeah, the product is actually not as good as what we thought. But sometimes the product is missing. Yeah. So what we are hoping to do is actually, can we attach, whenever you have a product, for instance, can we attach options to buy insurance also to ensure that whatever your product that you bought, will come on time, will come on not broken one. Yeah. So that kind of consumer protection facility is actually, and having additional layer, for instance, having insurance and so on. There's also a monitoring aspect, because there are other institutions that will have to be involved in that transaction, not just between you and the seller. Yeah? So I think that's something that I would go along with. Now on the crypto and blockchains, I think I agree with Brian. Crypto and more blockchains is a system that I think is well accepted right now. Yeah. Now, how do we see it from at least when we see on policymakers' side? Look, when you have a digitalization, the problem is that how do you manage the cross-border activities? I mean, yes, many people argue and has been even the best, the largest investor in the US keeps saying that crypto has no value. Yeah. But I can tell you, my team at IFG, they are all young people, below 29 years old. They all have invested in cryptos. Yeah. And sometimes I keep asking them, are you investing or are you actually gambling? Because when you invest, you don't lose 91% of your value within 1 week. Yeah, there's no way. What kind of investment is that? Yeah, but these are people investing on cryptos all over the world. So how do you deal with that? I have my personal views on the current regulations. Now again, this is not the views of coming from Kemenko Economy or from IFG. This is my personal views. I think we need to think about who is regulating them. Is it Bapeti or is it something else? Because it's a financial transactions what we do. This is not just a simple commodities. It's a very complex commodity. So I think that's the part of this. But the blockchains I like. Yeah, the blockchains I think I like. Now I have a questions from the monitor here. How optimistic are you about 2045 of achieving the target of financial deepening and inclusions to digitalization? It's happening. Yeah, financial deepening is happening. Financial inclusion is happening. So I'm optimistic on that one. What I'm hoping to see, like what the example that Brian was showing about ERIA. Yeah. How do we face right now food crisis. Yeah. We some of us actually facing difficulty in gathering enough rice, for instance, to meet the demand, domestic demand. So I think this is something that we can do also to support our farmer, our agriculture sector. through financial deepening, through financial inclusions. Yeah, informal sector is a big challenge for us. Yeah, how do we penetrate that? So this is something that I have to speak to Brian as well eventually. How do they do that? Yeah, targeting financial system. In our Cipta Kerja, in our omnibus law reforms on Cipta Kerja, we want to make sure to shift people from the informal to formal sector. But the reality is not that easy. Yeah, still 50%, more than 50% of our population, our labor force, are in the informal sector. So how do we penetrate that at this time and quickly? The second question is that does digital divide problem still become a distraction for Indonesia to achieve the targets? Well, that's the reality that we face, unfortunately. That's the difficulty that we face. Digital divide because of literacy. Yeah, I'm doing, for instance, with my team, we go to university across Indonesia. We do surveys, trying to understand literacy. We want to make sure does education of the mother influence literacy? Does the income level of the family influence literacy? Does where you live influence literacy? Yeah, whether you are actually in the top university or less than, or in the lower ranking university, does that influence literacy? The answer is yes, 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 yes. So the vision is always going to be there, Bapak Ibu. Okay, and it's always going to be there. Yeah, we are not going to bring the whole base of the society into the same level. That's impossible. But what we are going to do is actually increasing the base everywhere, every part of Indonesia. That's the goal. Equality, perfect equality, I'm sorry, that's not possible, I think. But bringing every single one on outward, yes, that's possible. I'm still optimistic. And about the financial sector in Indonesia, which is dominated by banking sector, and it is also dominated by one of public debt financing source. Will it be a lazy bank or self-asset phenomenon? I will not call my banking as a lazy bank. That's not the message. I hope you don't get that message from me, at least. What I'm saying is that we need to have a broad base. Yeah. Give you an example, Bapak Ibu. We are paying for the government bonds. We are paying 6-7% on the yield curve for 10-year government bonds. So if Ibu Ani needs money, she's paying 7% for 10 years government bond. Okay. Now, if I go to the bank and say, can you loan at the level below 7%? Bunga credit, lending loan rate below 7%. The bank can say, no way. Why would I do that? I mean, I could just buy government bonds at 7%. Why do I loan you at 7%? I will at least lend you at 10% because 7% is what I get from the government bond, and then there's a supervisory cost, opportunity cost, and so on and so forth. So to maybe 10%. So the question is that how do I lower government bonds that Ibu Ani has to pay? This is the insurance part. This is the risk mitigation part. Okay, so this is why we need to have the insurance capacity so that it reduces the risk facing our government bonds. Yeah. And second thing, how do we reduce that? Domestic funding. Why do we have to actually sell it to the foreign buyer if we have a domestic funding? Pension fund in Indonesia is less than 5% of the GDP. Can you imagine? 5%. 5%. I mean, we have 270 million people. Yeah? And it's only the saving that we got from that on the pension is 5% of GDP. You know what does that mean? That means be careful. When you're old, you may not have a retirement funding. You may not have a pension fund unless you work for a well-established institution like Bank Indonesia, for instance. Yeah. So that's a challenge. Yeah. Yeah. So we build that capacity, broadening that base. Bank is continuing to develop, but we need also the risk mitigation and the pension.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, I just want to add to the question about digital divide and say something that maybe you guys don't agree with, but for me, moving from Palo Alto, California to China was a great awakening for me and a humbling experience, because when I was in China at the time, it was 1999, we dealt with a lot of small business owners who probably didn't have more than a middle school education. My boss at the time barely got into college. Jack had to apply 3 times, and it was a second, third tier college. He had no tech background. And what it showed to me in terms of how China has developed was that a lot of the preconceptions that I grew up with did not apply to emerging markets. So what do I mean by that? You don't need to be a Harvard dropout to create one of the biggest internet companies in the world. You don't even need to have a technical background to create an internet company. And I saw that time and time again, where these entrepreneurs that you would never think could be successful became millionaires, billionaires, because they simply rolled up their sleeves and got stuff done. And one of the things about technology is I would caution us to think about upskill, upskill, upskill is the only answer. It's definitely important. But those who create technology should also create technology that's accessible to everyone. So why does WeChat have a voice command? This is a rumor, I don't know if it's true, but it's a good story. So Jet Li evidently cannot really read a lot of Chinese, the Kung Fu artist Jet Li. So we used to hang out when he'd come with us on trips, and he's very talkative, but he doesn't like to read. So one day he told, I guess, Pony Mog, why don't you, or he doesn't like to write. Reading is one thing, writing is a lot harder in Chinese. So he said, I don't want to have to write all these characters. Can you just make some function that's easier? So then he added the voice command. Well, when you add the voice command, you allow a whole group of people who cannot write Chinese the ability to communicate. And that sounds very basic, but it was a breakthrough for WeChat. So it's much about lowering the barrier to accessibility for technology as it is upskilling, and then giving people a chance. Like, with hundreds of millions of population in Indonesia, there is a lot of talent that is not being unlocked. In the same way that in China, there is so much talent that I saw that developed these tens of millions of SMEs. Some of them, when they started out, they were these small little companies, and now they're like listed companies in China. Many of them at Alibaba grew from nothing into listed companies, and they grew up on the platform. So I just want to put that out there, because this digital technology can be a force of unleashing talent if it's done in the right way. And I think what we need to do as a community is encourage the entrepreneurs who are building the platforms to figure out how to make it accessible to that talent, and then you get the talent to have the courage to use it and build a business off it. And then you're going to have a little more equalization in terms of society and distribution.
Yeah, it could facilitate and also unleash the potentials. Yeah. Okay. Because we already run out of time, perhaps Ibu Fitria would like to give some words before we close the sessions. Later on, yeah, after Ibu Fitria.
Well, for the banking policy, I guess it is on OJK, but I just want to point out the digital transformations. Always, come with the digital mindset, and the wise digital mindset, of course. And then, of course, our objective in Bank Central, of course, as our payment system authority, is to support product innovation, so that this innovation can have 3 I's. It is interoperability, and then interconnected and integrated, so it can be efficient and with fair market price. And the key success of the digital transformation is, of course, the synergy and collaboration with the industry, all authorities, and also how do you say that the market players and consumers, of course. I guess that's the key takeaways from my side.
Thank you. Okay, straight questions, yeah.
I'm
from Minister of Trade, and I will like to ask for the Ms. Reza, maybe Mr. Reza, maybe digital transformation must also be supported by regulation. Do you think how about the regulation about digital, about the Indonesia digital regulation, as we ready or not? The second is maybe I will answer to Mrs. Fitria about digital payment, which reach where this internet access is still difficult in the certain area. How about it? How about that? Maybe how about cash on delivery? Do you think about is to delay it or not? And maybe the last one I will ask Mr. Brian.
I think it's enough because we are running out of the time. Thank you.
Just one question, please.
Yeah, I think we need
Okay,
time
okay.
for them to answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Reza.
Just a quick one on the on the questions on regulations. It's always going to be behind. I mean, that's the reality. Yeah, literacy is definitely we need to improve. When I'm talking about literacy, I'm not talking about just literacy to the level of the individual, to the people, to the industry, and also to the policymakers. So that's one issue that we face. So it's always going to be an issue. But to me again, this is why when I'm trying to sell this to the policymaker, or at least when I'm doing my advising to my minister, I'm trying to make it within the context of macro, because you need to translate that. Yeah, what does that mean for us? Yeah, in terms of micro policy, in terms of our objective at the macro level. And I found that it's quite easy. Then once I sell that idea, then for them to appreciate, okay, then we have to do this, and that. But we have to do that. But it is going to be always an issue. Now let me just closing to my things. Right now we are less than 5,000 per capita in terms of our income. We are hoping to achieve 22,000 per capita by 2045. Why 22,000? Because that's the definitions of developed economy status. Now, whether we are going to be able to hit that, again, you decide. Of course, there's a big chances that we are not going to meet. Yeah, but that's the gap that we are facing, Bapak Ibu. Yeah, and this is why we need as an institution capacity to leapfrog. We cannot do whatever that we have done in the past. That leapfrog is basically, to me, is this digital transformation, this digital facility. So whether I like it or not, whether I'm just a macroeconomist, I have to speak to this guy. I have to speak to that lady. That's the reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibu.
Okay, right. So digitalization in rural area, because there are two main challenges in digitalization, of course. First one is signal, and the second one is literacy. Of course, we have spoken about literacy, education, and socialization, and so forth. And for signal, of course, it is quite a challenge in the rural area. But one of my keywords is synergy and collaboration. So collaboration among authorities, Bank Indonesia, with Kominfo, with Kementerian Koordinator Perekonomian, bahkan Kementerian Pariwisata, Kementerian Maritim dan sebagainya untuk mengakselerasi digital ini. Nah, Kominfo itu they have this roadmap on roadmap on digitalization atau membangun sarana komunikasi, yeah, things like that. They have this roadmap, and we collaborate with them to point out or do the mapping or which area is the most or highest priority for us to get into. Dan This collaboration is under the program of P2DD, percepatan dan perluasan digitalisasi daerah, the one that I speak about in my presentation. So, Kominfo dan Bank Indonesia sama-sama anggota di task force P2DD tersebut. Jadi itu dimungkinkan. Bank Indonesia sendiri punya program yang namanya PSBI gitu ya. Program PSBI ini kita juga membantu untuk taruh router di beberapa daerah yang tertinggal, mungkin di rural area yang membutuhkan, sehingga KRIS dan semua digitalisasi termasuk juga digitalization for regional Pemda itu juga bisa terlaksana dengan baik. So it is on progress, tapi bukan kita tutup mata, tetapi kita punya mapping step by step area mana yang prioritas.
Again, it's a collective effort.
Exactly.
Thank you very much again. Sorry for running out the time. Then again, the organizer remind us that we can download the seminar materials. Also, they would like to kindly request you to fill in the evaluation link in the QR code. Thank you very much. Let's have big applause for our speakers. Thank you, Bapak Ibu, for sharing your thoughts and knowledge. It's very precious. We really appreciate it on behalf of ERIA, Ministry of Trade, as well as Faculty of Economics, IPB, Agriculture Institute. I would like to conclude these sessions, and we'll hand over these stage to the MCs. Thank you.